Okay. So this is me. Brad said I work here. Picture of me in the flower crown. So it's really nice working here because I don't just get to work on front end stuff, I also get to work with some back end stuff and all sorts of things. And so just recently I got to basically rewrite one of my components. So what are we going to test? I wrote a date picker field using Atlas-Git components and React hooks. Thanks, Chris, for explaining all of that. So Atlas-Git is Atlassian's UI library, so it's just a whole bunch of React components that sort of provide standard functionality and look like their product. So the reason that we have to actually build this is because Atlas-Git doesn't let us set these date fields, right? So we needed to let people export a range of our roadmap, and so you have to set boundaries on it. And so we have an existing buggy implementation. It always took like an hour to figure out what's going on. Fixed a bug, you introduce another one. Yeah, so we decided to rewrite it 1 week. And so, you know, Atlassian won't let me do the date thing, so we did. So what did we use? I used TypeScript, Storybook, which is a way of just sort of rendering your components sort of outside of your application and just sort of look at them in isolation and set up different scenarios. And apologize to Philip when we talked about Storybook last week. I forgot how great it was when I was actually working on it. So TypeScript, as Chris said, you get to avoid a whole lot of errors, just passing the wrong things into places, just sort of keeps you focused on getting the work done. React hooks, so it's a whole lot of different things this component has to take care of, and it was all together. It wasn't even nested in hierarchy components, it was just all together. And so I used hooks to sort of just separate those concerns, just so I could compartmentalize them. And then of course we get to these testing stuff. So Jest DOM is just extends Jest to add some extra matches to work specifically with testing library, just so that you can very easily assert things that you want to when you're doing this sort of testing. It used to be known as React Testing Library. So it's really annoying because when I started this, it was React Testing Library. When I came back and all the library names have changed. And I'm like, oh, I have to find any docs. Yeah. So, you know, let's get on to what component testing actually is. We're testing our UI components. There's a few different ways here that we can sort of do this. We're not going to talk about these first two. So snapshot testing is when you take a component and you render it, and then you just sort of look at that output and put that in a file, and then you render it again later and you see if they check, if they match. This is a bit brittle. You sort of have to enforce that contract on both ends. So you have to sort of say, this implementation is correct and this output is correct. And when they don't match, you have to sort of make the decision of whether that's actually correct. So I feel it's a bit brittle for sort of more complicated components. Visual regression is where you render it out and you have a picture, you store that picture and you render it again later, you check the pixel diff on the images. And so you usually set like a threshold, and if the threshold is changed too much, it fails. I think this is probably better for really simple presentational components where, you know, the look of it matters more and there's not really a lot of stuff going on. And then this last one, where we serve against the DOM, sort of render the object, we render the component, and then instead of just dumping the output into a file and saying, yep, that's correct, we can actually sort of do checks against it and sort of run actions against the component whether that changes correctly. So testing library, this isn't specific to a test runner, so you can use this with, we've used this with Jest, you can use it with any of your test runners, but I don't think you're going to get those nice assertions. I think they only maintain those visions. So there's wrappers for React, Angular, Vue, there's more. So everyone here who works at Cello, you can go back and still use this. So hopefully.
Angular 1 or 2?
I didn't look that far. So Tennessee Dodds obviously is a big name. And this quote is actually right at the top of their guiding principles page. So this is the first thing they tell you when they explain what they're trying to do. And so the more your tests resemble the way your software is used, the more confidence they can give you. So what this means is that you test with the DOM nodes, you don't test your component instances. In fact, they don't actually ever give you a component instance, so you can never actually test against that or run methods on it directly. So it's really hard to actually get into that level where you're testing the implementation, which is really what we don't want to do at this point. And what was really great about this was sort of moving this class-based date picker over to this function-based one with hooks. It wasn't very clear to me, how to pull these things apart and how to actually build this thing. All I sort of knew was in my mind what it felt like to actually use it. So we'll move on to some simple examples here. Thanks, Chris, for explaining what this sort of stuff is. So we have three different, it's not very nice, is it? We have a few different Hello World functions here, well, React components. Top one is just a stateless functional component. The second one, we're using a hook. So we're setting the state to hello world and we're just displaying it. And the third one is just a class component. What's great is I can actually go and write this little test here. We can actually sort of see that we can actually, these should all pass the same test. So for all of these components, we're going to use this get by text helper. So you render your component, this render function is actually from the testing library, and then you get a whole bunch of functions that you can use against essentially the DOM tree that's rendered out. And so we're going to get hello world, and we expect it to be in a document. Bit of a punchy thing we have to do here, but all these pass. So all of these components, regardless of how we got there, they all pass this test. So this is great. But now we have to sort of think about interaction. So, I pulled Redux's counterexample, and I just set some limits on it. So we can't go below 0. We can't go above 10. So what sort of things do you guys think we would, test in this component?
You can't go below 0, you can't go above 2.
Yeah, so how would you do that?
I'll say it's a component to a test.
So I've just sort of glossed by the implementation of this component. You don't actually care too much. I've just written a few tests here where we should render 0 initially, we render it out, and we go look for something that says 0, and we expect that to exist. And then we can use this other one where we get out the subtract button just by looking at the text again, so sort of how a user would do it. Look and the button says that. And so on the initial render, we expect it to be disabled, which is again another one of those nice little matches that you get with just DOM extension. Disabled add button when memory 10. So here we're actually using a helper to, you first get out the add button, and then we actually just click it 10 times. 10 times. And then we just say, oh, it should be in the document, and the add button must be disabled. Yeah. So, you know, it's very much like the language we think about it. You used to reason about it in the first place. You're not really like taking your fake DOM output and sort of parsing it and going looking for certain things. And you don't actually have to create like a stateless version to test against, so you can actually contain the state in here. Whereas if you were doing this in a more snapshotty way, you might actually have a stateless version that you've actually set the value to 10, and then you do assertions on that instead of actually interacting with it. I guess this is probably where I'll have failed to explain something, so I'll actually open up to questions at this point. If there's any.
Is there more? Do you use it if you do use effect, like and you call a request or something? Like what would you do about it?
You would sort of do your traditional testing thing, you'd mark that out.
Like jets.
Yeah. So you'd use your test runner to mark out any side effecty external stuff. Yeah.
Can you rely on DOM testing enough to not worry about the visual stuff for the other methods?
I think that's sort of a little bit of a different thing, where this is sort of testing the behavior of one component,
Yeah.
you know, matches to what you think, whereas your visual regression is more of an end-to-end test, where you might render a whole screen in your app and then check screenshots against that after builds.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you had, like, say, some hooks that, you know, you used it a lot, so it's like, you know, not duplicating your stateful logic. Would you still opt for using a component that uses, like, all of the functionality of that hook rather than testing the hook in isolation? I'm just thinking because, like, if you test a hook in isolation, you're not doing this close to the user under testing.
I guess it's a matter of, I don't think really testing hooks directly. I'm not so sure about how you go about that. But as it functions, you could probably just assert on output. But actually no, because the hooks aren't hooked up to React at that point. So you would actually sort of extract that logic you want to test, and then you just do a normal unit test on that.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. Hey. Yeah, and then so just one more test here. Where we, yeah, it should go to 0 to 10. So yeah, we set 0 at the beginning, and then we actually just sort of test after each interaction that it does what we want.
So, with the get by text fail, it seems like that to be in document is superfluous.
Yeah, because to an extent, it is superfluous.
Like if it didn't find the get by text, would it also fail?
So you would actually, there's different types of matchers. And so a get by or a get all by would fail if it didn't find it. Whereas you would sort of, if there sort of was the ability that it might not be there, I guess you would actually use query by, which it'll just catch it. It went through an error and it'll just say, oh, I couldn't find it. Yeah, cool. So to sort of close the loop on the whole date picker thing, I went and took a screenshot of running the component tests against that, as well as the coverage for the files in that dependency tree. So we can see, you know, it's pretty high here. It's like 98% of the statements have been covered by just the component test. And that includes 2 hooks and a helper. So I've indirectly tested these hooks just by testing that the user gets the right experience. So that's what I found really cool about this, where, you know, I can make a change in a hook that I don't really understand the knock-on effect, right? And then, you know, 5 tests will fail. Or there's a new test I have to add, and then the same thing where you just tweak the hook and you don't really understand what's going to happen. And the test passes and it doesn't break anything else. And you're like, it's great. So, yeah. Of course, I didn't really talk about where you would actually write these component tests. This is probably one of the more complicated components that we have. It is probably the only component we have written a component test for. The rest of it is mostly presentational and pretty simple data to DOM, and you sort of try and keep that complexity out of your components. The thing is, you have to actually teach your test runner about JSX, which can not be fun sometimes. It's really easy with Babel. With Babel and Jest, because Jest will just read your Babel config and run your files through. Whereas TypeScript, you have to, it's a bit more effort. You just have to configure that. And the great thing was that it's such a focused library where it really only gives you exactly what you need to do these sorts of tests. So you don't sort of have this giant toolbox and you don't know what you're doing. I've written 1 or 2 enzyme tests before, and up front there was this decision of whether I'm shallow rendering or deep rendering a component. And that is whether or not the children are mocked out. And then you get all these other tools, and people end up testing internals of their components and tweak the component, and the user will still have the same experience, but your test will fail. So this just really helps you avoid that. So yeah. Any more questions?
Thank you. That component was hell.
It was. Yes, Chris?
Is this, do you know if the backend, is it running like Selenium against an actual browser to render the components, or is it something more like JS DOM where, you know, you can't sort of see the browser running things?
Yeah, so this is more JS DOM.
Yeah.
There is a wrapper around this for Cypress, which is a more end-to-end testing thing that I don't really know much about. But, so yeah, it does use JS DOM underneath, and it's actually just leveraging JS DOM from Jest.
Yeah.
Cool. Is Jay on the library that guy wrote? No, that was Jay's. That's cool. I love the fact that you can like do assertions on elements on such a small scope. Like, I'm used to using Selenium, and it's like, oh, I'll just find that issue by ID or by element by ID or by class, but just do it has a plus. Like, that's it's super easy to just go down. That's the one I'm after. I don't really know.
Especially when you're testing one component, it's like a plus. When you're switching from plus in Selenium, it's like, it's different pluses.
I'd say there are, of course, more queries you can run against components to get, placeholder text, input, form field values and labels, and if he really has to come to it like a data test document. So you can't sort of escape trying to, that's sort of like the one escape hatch, I feel, where if you can't sort of reliably use a query that would sort of be at some level accessible to the user, you can't just put a test ID on the value and grab it out. Yeah.
Did you have any problems? Like, was there anything that annoyed you about it? Was it all just some like unicorns and rainbows?
I think the hard bit was actually just getting it set up, especially coming back to it like 2 weeks later and the library having changed names. and just solve the whole. So of course I use TypeScript, so I had to take the harder path with configuring it. Yeah, that was just about it, and a whole lot of having the docs open.
Cool.